You guys, could we ask you a quick favor? Would you take just about 5 seconds to rate, review, and subscribe? Doesn't take much time, but it means a lot and helps other parents find their way to what we hope is some helpful content.
Hey friends, welcome to the Raising Boys and Girls podcast. I'm Sissy Goff.
And I'm David Thomas.
And I'm Melissa Trevathan.
And we're so glad you joined us for this conversation. Let's dive in.
Jemar Tisby is the New York Times best-selling author of The Color of Compromise, the award-winning How to Fight Racism and the Spirit of Justice. He is a historian who studies race, religion, and social movements, and serves as a professor at Simmons College of Kentucky, a historically Black college. He is also the founder of The Witness Incorporated, an organization dedicated to Black uplift from a Christian perspective. He has written for numerous news outlets, has offered commentary on CNN, and is frequently called upon to provide insight on current events related to race and Christianity. He has spoken nationwide at colleges, universities, and other organizations. And make sure to listen all the way to the end because Jemar gives such rich encouragement to all of you wherever you are today. Jemar, we are delighted to get to meet you. Have appreciated and been fans of your work for a long time. And so it's fun to get to intersect today. And before we talk about the books and all the work that you're doing, will you start off talking a little bit about your story and how you found your way to this work?
So I love to talk about my first career. After I graduated college, I had this liberal arts degree in American studies, and I'm like, okay, looks like I'm pretty much unemployable. But I had this great education. And so I said, well, maybe I can teach, which was never on the radar. My mom was a teacher for 30 plus years.
Wow.
And I was like, great for her, not for me. And, the way life works out, I ended up joining Teach for America and became a 6th grade science and social studies teacher. That was supposed to be for 2 years. I ended up spending about 15 years in Arkansas, where they placed me in the Delta region.
Where in Arkansas? I'm from Arkansas.
Oh, okay. We were right on the river in Helena, Arkansas.
Oh, yes. I have some great friends from Helena.
Oh, very good.
Been there several times. Yeah, you were in the Delta for sure.
Very much so. And it was, I learned far more than I taught, which is typically the case in those situations. It was listed as the 4th poorest county in the country.
Wow.
And so we were dealing with issues of generational poverty, injustice. All of those things took on a real face in the form of my students every day and their families in the community I was in. So I did that for several years and then ended up actually as the middle school principal, grades 5 through 8 for several more years before I transitioned into seminary and then PhD work for history and authoring books.
Yes. Wow.
Well, we're going to come back to your career as an educator in a few minutes because we want to ask you more about that. But you have done so much work to fight racism, including speaking all over the world, writing several books that we're super excited to talk about today. But first, we came across an article you wrote called Losing Your Biggest Fan. And we both have lost ours in the past few years. And will you begin by just speaking for a minute about the power of moms and what your mom did to remind you that she was your biggest fan?
My mom believed in me before I knew how to believe in myself. I remember her helping me with this solar system project one time in 5th grade. I was so anxious about it. It was the night before, and she just had this way of knowing kids, her own kids, but also her students. I mentioned she was a teacher, and she knew I knew the material. I just needed to get over this intellectual block that I couldn't do it. And she coached me, just gently prodding me in the right direction. And before I knew it, I was off to the races, finished the project, felt good about it. And that was just one example of countless examples of the way she had this individualized wisdom and insight about what every kid needed to fulfill their own unique potential. And so when I say she was my biggest fan, she died in 2020 of Alzheimer's.
I'm
And,
so sorry.
that's just a horrible way to
Yes,
go
it
because you
is.
lose them again and again and again.
Mm,
And so, obviously, a huge blow to our family. But the way I try to honor her is by continuing to be an educator and continuing to remind myself of who she mirrored back and reflected who I could be. Right?
mm,
So, she always had, as mothers do, this incredibly high sense of their kids' potential and what they're capable of. And I find myself on an almost daily basis wondering what my mom would say about these books I've written, about the work and even the ministry I'm doing. And to the best of my ability, I've tried to make her proud, and I think she would be.
mm. I am confident of
Absolutely.
that. And I hope that all three of our moms have found each other today in heaven and are maybe watching us have this conversation
I
together.
love that image. Oh, I
Yes.
love that image.
Well, I love what you said of she believed in me before I knew how.
Yes.
And that is certainly true of moms and
Mm.
dads, both. That is beautiful, Jemar. Thank you.
Thank you for asking about her.
Yes. Well, we want to talk about the books, the new books. You have a best-selling book for adults. You got ones for kids too that we're going to talk about, but it's called The Spirit of Justice. And we are so excited about that book and would love for you to talk a little bit about it and what inspired you to write it.
Thank you so much. Yes. So, The Spirit of Justice, True Stories of Faith, Race, and Resistance. I dedicated, all my other books are dedicated to particular individuals who I personally know in my life. This one is different. I dedicated this book to all those who are weary and heavy laden.
Mm.
And the idea is that when you get on this journey of justice, you find it's a long road. As a matter of fact, it's a never ending road. And it's not a smooth one. So we are often, one step forward, two steps back, or two steps forward, one step back on this journey. And you get tired and you get weary. And there's a verse in the Beatitudes, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness.
Yes.
I don't know if you've ever been hungry or thirsty before, but it ain't pleasant, right? So,
Yes.
I wanted this book to be sustenance, cold water on a hot day, relief from a heavy burden for those people who are on this journey of justice and feel sometimes like it's not winning, like we're not winning. And because indeed, sometimes we aren't. But these stories tell us about the people who, in spite of all the odds and the obstacles, found a way to resist injustice and keep on going. So hopefully it would inspire us to do the same.
It's incredible.
It is. And now we're going to take a little break to hear from one of our sponsors who makes this podcast possible. David, did you know the liver is the second largest organ in your body?
I thought it was my stomach because I'm hungry all the time.
No, the liver is responsible for over 500 functions in your body. But for some reason, liver health doesn't always get the attention it deserves.
Shout out to the liver for working so hard. Dose for Your Liver was formulated to cleanse your liver of unwanted elements, aid digestion, and maintain your body's filter. Dose is gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, and vegan.
Stick with Dose and feel the incredible benefits over time. More energy, better digestion, reduced bloating, healthier liver enzyme function, reduction in brain fog, and better sleep.
I need all that. Save 30% on your first month of subscription by going to dosedaily.co/RBG or entering RBG at checkout.
That's dosedaily.co/RBG for 30% off your first month subscription. And now back to our show.
And from that great work, you recently released Stories of the Spirit of Justice for 8 to 12-year-olds. So we'd love to ask you, tell us why you decided to write a book for that age group and what you hope young readers will gain from it.
Those are kind of your people. You taught them for a while.
Exactly. I feel like every teacher, every educator loves their age group. And then the educators who don't teach that age group are like, oh my goodness, I could never. Right? Like I was middle school, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. I couldn't do the little kids helping tie shoes and things like that. I couldn't do the older kids. They're all way taller and cooler than me. The middle school was just right for me. So Stories of the Spirit of Justice is for those kind of tween years, if you will. And I was eager to do it. So it's actually my second book for this age group. So I wrote another book called How to Fight Racism. And then I wrote a young reader's edition of that book, How to Fight Racism, kind of equipping kids with practical ways to exercise agency against, unfairness and justice.
Mm.
And that was a learning experience. And I said, I want to do another one. And this time I want it to be even better. So I signed up to write the adult book and to write the young reader's version, which I didn't quite realize was a completely different book almost. So it was so much labor, but the work I put into it was to make the language accessible for 8 to 12-year-olds and put it in a format that they could digest what it is. So I'm so excited about the usability of this book. So you can hand this to kids and have them read it on their own, or you can read it with them. But I love it because it's divided into historical eras. And then at the beginning of every different historical era, there's a brief, I'm talking like 2-3 pages, historical overview. So kids know what's kind of going on in that. And then you get a series of mini biographies. So it's, again, 2-3 pages long each of folks they've heard of or never heard of. People like Sister Thea Bowman to Coretta Scott King to Ida B. Wells and Frederick Douglass, all those folks. But here's the other cool thing about it that I as a PhD historian, get excited about. So often these books for these ages, which are great content, they focus on one figure or one historical era. And so you get this real kind of fine focus. This book is a historical survey. So guess what? You finish this book, you've got a sense of the breadth of U.S. history, some of the most important developments in our nation's history, but also you get a sense that the progress and the positive change that we've seen didn't come out of nowhere. And you have over 40 different people and events that you can point to and say, I know something about them and how they work to make our nation a better place for all people. So I'm excited that you get this plethora of history and people to access.
Oh, we are so excited too. And we have, if you're watching on YouTube, we have that book and the book you wrote for littles between us called I Am the Spirit of Justice, which we love the title. And we'd love to hear why you chose that and what you're wanting to instill in littles. And it's specifically 4 to 8-year-olds you talk about, what you're wanting to inspire from it.
So this was my very first picture book, and what an adventure. First of all, the art on here is amazing. Nadia Fisher.
It is. We loved it.
It's just like one of those things where you can buy it and you can just like put it on the wall as a piece of art, and I've even got some prints from the inside cover of the book behind me. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous book. So I'm so thrilled at the way it turned out, the colors, the vibrancy, the shapes, all of it. The content, though, is designed to help parents, adults, guardians, educators start the conversation. So I often get the question when it comes to race and racial justice, when do we talk about it? How do we talk about it with kids, young kids especially? And I say, in general, the only wrong conversation to have about it is no conversation at all. Because so often, because it's sensitive and touchy, we're hesitant to even broach the topic. And the reality is, we can take the pressure off ourselves because it's not a one and done thing. You're going to have these conversations again and again and again, and you can build on the knowledge, but getting started is the hardest part. So I Am the Spirit of Justice comes along as a way for parents to sit down with the kids in their lives, or adults to sit down with the kids in their lives and be like, let's read this book and talk about it. So I do want to forewarn adults. This is not the book that you give to the 4 or 5-year-old and say, go off and read it on your own. This is something you really do need to sit down with the kids, because they're going to have questions and curiosities and puzzlement and all of those things you want in a curious kid. But you do need to be there and walk it through with them. And I'll bet you, as an adult, you're going to be pleasantly surprised at the perceptive questions that kids ask, and B, your ability to address those questions humanely and probably with more knowledge than you think going into it. So I hope it builds confidence.
Great encouragement.
Great invitation.
Yes.
Thinking more on that, what practical ideas, in addition to reading the book, would you encourage parents to do to teach kids about justice and racial reconciliation?
You got to take them places. Take them on little family field trips to important sites. Obviously, those can be museums. And I know that word is like a turnoff for kids, museum. But trust me, there's an entire field of history called public history, where what they focus on is how to present history in public settings like museums. And so they're experts at this, and they do it really, really well. Some of my favorite museums, Museum of the New South in Charlotte. Of course, the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, which is built onto the Lorraine Motel where Dr. King was assassinated. The Civil Rights Museum, Mississippi Civil Rights Museum in Jackson, Mississippi. And there's a lot of different treasures out there. Chicago Historical Museum, and of course, National Museum of African American History and Culture. Those are all great. But guess what? You don't have to travel far for this. In your own town, your own county, your own region, I guarantee you, there are some really interesting sites that will open up discussions, whether it's a statue downtown or a historical marker on the sidewalk or a more locally focused history museum or even a historical society that has some cool different artifacts. Your local library. Oh, I was in the airport in San Francisco just the other day. They had this really cool exhibit on African instruments.
Wow.
And it's just like the places you can find public history are astounding. But when you take kids to a place, what it does is it makes it concrete, tangible, material, so that they can start to understand some abstract concepts. And guess what? This is good for adults too. We still need visual aids. And so I do encourage adults to take your kids places that have some historical significance, help unpack it, answer their questions. And guess what? It doesn't matter if they don't completely grasp or absorb it at the time. Again, this is an ongoing conversation. What you're simply doing is providing opportunities to open up that conversation again and again and again. So that, I mean, my ultimate goal with all of these books, and I call it all these books together, Justice for All Generations. My ultimate goal with the kids' books is that they would never have to do what we so often have to do as adults, which is say, why didn't anyone ever teach me this?
Yes.
Wow.
Thank you for
that.
that.
Interrupt that cycle.
Oh, yes. Jemar, it is so obvious that you have this background in education because you have such a teacher's heart and spirit and enthusiasm that it feels so infectious. It's really fun to listen to you talk about it. And we are so honored that we have a lot of educators listen to the podcast. And David's wife is one. And I think in some ways, it's harder to be an educator than it's ever been. And we would love to know just what encouragement you would give to any educators who are out there.
Well, it doesn't look like it on the paycheck, but educators are some of the most supported, beloved members of our society by everyday folks, by parents, by community members, by local officials.
By podcast hosts.
Yes. Podcast hosts, absolutely. What y'all do on a day-to-day basis with our nation's children is absolutely essential and vital. And I would say at a local level, folks have not forgotten that. And they're not interpreting who you are and what you do strictly through the lens of headlines. They're interpreting it through the text message they get, your kid did so great today. I just want you to know. They're interpreting it through the emails from the school, from the fundraisers, from all of the sort of life of the family that gets absorbed into school life and educational life, whatever form that takes, homeschooling, private school, public school. So there is a personal aspect to it. And what I'm trying to say is you have some really, really big fans out there.
Yes.
And when it gets tough, don't be afraid to ask for help and reach out. And also don't be surprised at the outpouring of support that you get from the parents, from the community, from the people who know what you're doing, how important it is, and what you're up against.
Amen.
Yes.
Thank you for those
I
words.
know.
We would love to also ask you, what do you believe kids need most from their parents today?
I think we need honesty. And the way I mean that is there's a lot of bad stuff happening in the world, a lot of demoralizing stuff happening in the world, especially around education, and it is, I think, natural probably for adults to want to shield kids from a lot of that. But number one, as you both well know, kids are way more observant than we give them credit for. So even if they can't name what's happening, they can pick up on how you're feeling and what you're talking about. And they hear a lot more than we realize. And so they're already aware, right? They're already conscious to a degree. And then number two, it's just like we think we're shielding them from it. We're really not. And when I say honesty is required at an age appropriate level for them, let's be real about what's happening. Like, we are in a very tense political situation, and that means a lot of folks are on edge. They're kind of anxious and relate to the kids. Have you ever felt like anxious about something that was going to happen or you thought might happen? Well, now there are a lot of adults who feel that way, some of them for the first time, and we're all just trying to figure it out. So it's not about having answers. It is about treating them as the little humans they are, not patronizing them with pat answers, and certainly not leaving them to silence, because the reality is nature abhors a vacuum. So in the absence of your conversations about this, your honesty about this, something's going to fill that. And it's probably not going to be that helpful.
Such a great reminder. Well, in terms of what we were saying about educators, we also feel like in all these years of counseling families, we have never felt like parents were as discouraged. And you not only have a gift of teaching, but you also have a gift of encouragement, which is obvious through every question we've asked. And so we'd love to hear what you would say to encourage weary parents.
Number one, as I'm sure y'all would encourage, feel your feelings. I really think it's unhelpful to try to jump to the activism, the resistance, the idea that everything's going to be okay. Here's the reality that we should understand as adults. We don't know how things are going to turn out. And I feel kind of bad because in a lot of my public speaking and writing lately, my role is to tell folks, like, what's happening now is different. And unfortunately, it's going to be chaotic and unpredictable. And I would really love nothing better than to sit here and say, we're absolutely going to win the game. But I don't know that for sure. What I do know is life isn't just about what happens to you, it's about how you respond to it. And so much of what I think is productive for us to focus on as people seeking justice, as people trying to raise healthy kids, is virtue. That old-fashioned word of virtue and character. So what I'm focused on are two things. One, I believe that we each have unique gifts that can be applied for the common good. And so for me, that's teaching, that's educating, whether that's writing or video or courses, whatever it might be. I'm trying to lean into what I know I can do and what I'm uniquely equipped to do. And I believe we're all uniquely equipped with some gifts, skills, experience, background for the common good. So I think discerning that is one. The second thing is focusing on who you are as a person, the kind of person who's honest, the kind of person who's courageous in moments that really count, the kind of person who has empathy. Those are the things that may not change the outcome of an election or change a law or a policy, but we can change ourselves in positive ways. And that has ripple effects on those around us, especially the kids. So that's a lot. But I'm just trying to be
so
realistic here, about there's only so much we can control externally. But the reality is what really counts over the long term is who we are becoming internally and how that affects the world around us.
Eugene Peterson said the most important part of being a parent is being a person.
Ooh, yes.
Which is so much of what you're saying. And Jemar, I feel like everyone is going to have had the same experience of just being so grateful for you and all of the messages that you're putting out there. And so for folks who want to find and follow you, where can folks find you?
The best way to support me is at this platform called Substack. It's like a newsletter on steroids. I write there at least a couple of times a week, all my latest thoughts on current events, faith, justice, and that is jemartisby.substack.com. It's in all my link in bios and everything, jemartisby.substack.com. And of course, getting the books. So I have platform on bookshop.org if you want to support independent bookstores, but it can also be found wherever books are sold. And you can get the adult version, The Spirit of Justice, the young readers version, Stories of the Spirit of Justice, and then the picture book, I Am the Spirit of Justice, for all ages.
Yes, we would highly recommend them all.
Yes, we would. Jemar, I was thinking before we wrap up about our conversation about our moms earlier and your desire to honor her by continuing to be a teacher. And I want to just confirm that's happening. It's happened for us today. We've learned from you today, and I know folks listening have as well. So you are honoring her and living into her legacy in a really extraordinary way. So thank you for having this conversation with us.
I did not expect to be so uplifted, although I shouldn't be surprised. Thank you deeply so much for the work that you're doing, bringing humanity and heart to raising kids and existing as better humans in this world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, we end every episode with something fun and food related. We move from the substantive to the silly. So we've got a 2-part food question for you. Part 1 is queso or guac, and part 2 is what's your favorite taco?
Okay. All right. So I love the taste of queso. Dairy doesn't always agree with me, so I got to go with the guac.
Okay.
We get that.
We get it.
And then the second part was favorite
taco.
Oh my goodness.
And it could be purchased or prepared.
I got to say, living in the Delta for so long, they did great with barbecue. They did great with pulled pork. So I'm going to go with a pulled pork taco.
That's a great choice. Yeah. That Arkansas barbecue is something.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Jemar, thank you. What a delight to get to spend time with you.
Yes.
You have a new fan here for sure. Thank you so much for engaging with these books and this critically important topic for our time.
Oh, we're so honored.
Yes, we are. Stay tuned for next week when we sit down with Melissa Trevathan to begin talking about the spiritual milestones. The first one is foundation.
David, what a team we have that we get to call friends who help make this podcast possible.
Amanda Young, our operations manager.
Chris Starrett, our engineer.
Our management team at H Squared.
We are thrilled to be a part of the That Sounds Fun network.
Our music was created by the insanely talented Dave Haywood of Lady A.
And if this podcast felt helpful to you, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, all the things.
We are grateful for you and cheering you on always.